All right, hello and welcome in, everybody. It's been a few weeks, and we are excited to get jumping and get back at it. We are your Titans of Fantasy Football podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Daigle. With me, Caleb Armstrong. So today we are, as we said in our last pod, which was, I think 3 weeks back, we are going to be covering undervalued players right now. So guys who at their ADP and where it's pretty early in the game, but early draft rankings have come out, and these guys are getting not the love that they deserve for the caliber of player they are. But a couple guys we're pretty excited about and excited to share. This is the start of the fantasy season, so this is kind of where you want to start looking at who you can capitalize on, who's a value, and all that sort of thing. So, Caleb, how you doing? You want to start us off today?
Oh boy, yeah, I'll get us into the content right away. So like Garrett said, guys, we're going with early season or preseason, I guess you could say, undervalued players. So camps have been going on for now. You're hearing a little bit of little murmurs, some guys and all that stuff. But these are guys who right now at the current ADPs, half PPR, that they're just early value, which they could definitely rise. Hearing some camp murmurs and goes on if it goes their way, but these are guys who performed well last year, and we just think are of a value right now. So value is, I guess, Garrett, how would you describe value players? So like guys that not like they're gonna like crazy perform at their level that they're at, but like at the current position they're getting them at, that they're gonna I guess exceed expectations, but not like a whole lot. Like they're not gonna boom, but like that they
Yeah.
could just
And I would say too, these are guys that typically, if they're in later rounds, you're willing to grab a round ahead, or if these guys are going start round two, you might be willing to grab them at the end of round one instead, or just any kind of value where you say, hey, these guys are players that really we should be drafting earlier, and we feel really good about the draft position they're at in comparison to maybe other guys in that range as well.
yeah. Yeah. So I guess I'll get started. And this guy right now, it doesn't make sense of where his ADP is, in my opinion, and why he's getting drafted as low as he is compared to what he did last year. And that is Josh Jacobs. Right now, his current ADP is 21, RB7 off the board. And for all of you that played fantasy football last year, Josh Jacobs was at this time last year considered like a fourth, fifth round pick, and he was scary because he played in the preseason game. They drafted Zamir White, could take away carries, and when the season came along, it was Josh Jacobs and only Josh Jacobs. And so, with that being said, right now, he finished as an RB1 last season in fantasy. I believe so, right, Garrett?
I think in standard he was 1, in PPR he was 3.
Okay. So, yeah, a little off there, but the top three back, okay? Right now, like I said, he's RB7 off the board. And this is why I'm saying he's a value, because we've seen Josh Jacobs for the past 3 years put up RB1 type numbers. And right now you're drafting him as a later half RB1. But we saw his upside last year, and he could be that top three again. And this is the reason why, is because they brought in nobody. Like we said last year, the competition was supposed to be Amir Abdullah and Bolden and Zamir White. Neither of the guys really took much for carries away, and neither of those guys really actually took away from the receiving game, which Josh Jacob was still good in the receiving game as well, let alone leading the league in rushing yards. And the thing with Jacobs that he's shown since he's came into the league is his consistency to stay on the field. And then also the fact is that he can burst big runs. Jacobs last year had one of the runs, probably one of the highlight reels of the year. To be honest, he had that game-winning, what was it, 92-yard or something like that.
Yeah, well, that walk-off touchdown.
Yeah, and just gone, daylight, see ya. And right now, like I said, you can get him at the late turn, or almost at the turn on the second round. So he's going late second right now, and like we talk about value, like he's a guy who probably should be ending up in that late first round, to be honest, or mid first. I feel like that's where he could potentially like be drafted anywhere from there down. For a guy, especially like we said, who was so consistent as of last year, and then also is still young. So, and then again, I didn't mention this. He has Jimmy G as his quarterback now. And so we know Jimmy G isn't the most prolific passer. He's not going to be throwing 40 pass attempts a game, but he also likes to dink and dump to the running backs as well. So that could very well, keep Jacobs' PPR value high with his receiving game still being there.
Yeah, Jacobs it's funny to see somebody that was coming off of RB1 season, whether standard or RB3 in PPR, and you turn around on that and you say, let's knock him down. He's late first, early second, when not much of the situation has changed. I mean, I say late first, early second for what I'm viewing him, but according to ADP right now, he's late second, so 21 overall. Yeah, that's mid to late second right there. It's a value and definitely something where if you have any early drafts or he doesn't move up hardly, then getting him in the second round would be, man, what a steal getting a bell cow like that.
Mm-hmm.
The first guy I have here is kind of in a similar boat. It's another running back, finished very high. I'm Uh, pretty excited about him this year in comparison to the years past, just because things have changed for his situation. So last year in PPR, Tony Pollard finished as the RB7, and that is with Ezekiel Elliott in his 12 rushing touchdowns last year. Elliott notably released this summer, and Pollard clearly in a much better situation. So Pollard last year ended up, like I said, mid RB1 range and had only 193 carries on the year. He had several explosive plays. He was clipping off at 5.2 yards per carry, still had 9 rushing touchdowns of his own, but a lot of those were made for longer plays and such. He also, got some work in the the game in the air, catching balls. He had another 371 yards, 3 more touchdowns. Now, in an offense where he's, the only guy, the lead back, he most likely is not going to be coming off the field very much. The Dallas Cowboys really like to use their running backs and, in a heavy way around the goal line. Since Dak has been there, that's kind of been their go-to, way to capitalize in the red zone. And now you have Pollard, who's sitting here at 23 overall for his ADP, which is RB9. And looking at that and kind of in comparison to some of the other players in that range, that is in the Jacobs, Henry, Pollard, that's kind of where they're at. But guys going ahead of them, both Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. You have Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nick Chubb, and really like that whole group of guys, I would much rather have both Josh Jacobs and Tony Pollard. Um, I'd like to see those two closer to like the Jonathan Taylor range, right around 12, 13, right on that end of round 1, early round 2 cusp. And I really think that for what he brings to the table, he's got the potential to be a top 3 RB on the year. And whether it's with explosive plays, whether it's with a little bit higher workload, he's the kind of guy who could clip off 1,400 yards and then add another 400 through the air. And we would not be surprised one bit. He's still only 26 years old. Should have plenty of tread left on the tire after a few years playing backup. Really just an exciting guy to look forward to at the start of the year. And, right now he is being undervalued because, just a lot of other players to be excited about too.
Yeah. This is my first year. I'm finally in on Tony Pollard. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said there, another guy who, potentially you could feel comfortable using a late first on. So, especially like the key points you hit on there. One thing I just want to mention, Mike McCarthy has come out again this year and saying he wants to establish the run more too. So, there should be more opportunities there for Pollard. And I think the RB2 right now is Malik Davis. Is that correct, Garrett? Or is it
I
Ronald Jones?
believe so.
It's Ronald Jones or Malik Davis. I don't know what the official depth
Yeah.
chart is there, but it's one of those two, which, not high name guys anymore there for sure. Um, but okay, my second target here for the value is a guy, and I feel like again it's in that tier of forgotten players of last year that just way first off outperformed their draft capital last year, but then also had another career year here, and that is Christian Kirk. ADP 54 right now, wide receiver 26. And people might be thinking, well, Ridley's in town. Ridley's it just screamed up the freaking ADP charts for not playing, a year and a half. Calvin Ridley right now is getting drafted at the wide receiver 20, 43 in ADP. So he's in that third, fourth round right now and getting drafted as a wide receiver 2 value, which I feel, pretty right. Like Calvin Ridley we've seen him put up, high our wide receiver 1 numbers. But the fact is that, hasn't played in a year and a half. And Christian Kirk last year balled out for Jacksonville on, he lived up to that contract that he got, had a career high last year, 84 catches, about 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns. You made okay, that's a good year. What does that finish at? He finished as a wide receiver 1. He finished as wide receiver 11 on the year. So, above guys that were I think he was right below Devonta Smith, right below Stephon Diggs last year, up in that area of these, true alphas of last year kind of. But Kirk, just kind of forgotten because Ridley's in town. But the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, he doesn't play the outside like Ridley does. He plays a slot. He primarily played a slot last year. The guy who's going to be most affected is Zay Jones, if anybody, from Calvin Ridley. And, Lawrence is likely to take almost another step. He really improved from his rookie year to his sophomore year. And right now, that offense has just so much talent and such a good offensive line in front of him. Lawrence couldn't literally support two. I can easily see him supporting 2 top 36 wide receivers, pretty easily. And right now, Kirk and Ridley are both being drafted in that late. Well, Kirk in that late wide receiver 2, Ridley in that late or early wide receiver 3, with Kirk being, the better of the as of late wide receivers. And it doesn't make sense, I guess, in the fact that he's drafted that low. Like, he's gonna be a value there. You have to suspect that he's gonna still see a heavy target load coming his way.
Yeah. It's really interesting when you look at the target comparison between Kirk and Zay Jones. And you already alluded to the fact that Zay Jones is the one playing on the outside. So Zay had 121 targets last year, and Kirk had 133. If we go and say that, coming in, like Zay Jones is the one that's affected, most likely, Kirk could take a little bit of a hit, but the way that his ADP is set up is, right now he's going off so low in the 50s, and it's like, all right, it doesn't take very much for him to go and sustain something pretty similar to his finish last year. He's the wide receiver 26 off the board, which is just comical because he most likely is going to end up in the teens and definitely outproduce what he's at right now. Yeah, he's definitely at an intriguing position where it's nice to snatch him up while he's still a value.
Yeah. And like we said, well, obviously, if we're hearing all good things about Ridley right now, and I think that's the reason why, because Ridley's climbing up, Kirk is falling down, and that's just the way it's been going this offseason. Ridley, it sounds like he's a real deal. He's back to himself, what he was, in 2021, and okay. We got to see that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm a big Ridley fan. Don't get me wrong. I'm all in on Calvin Ridley this year too. But I thought he was gonna be a value. Now he's getting to the point where it's like, okay, you're drafting him at probably where he's gonna finish roughly right now. He's in
Yeah,
that range. So,
and he's
probably
like you said, he's just getting hotter and hotter. People are going to keep rising up and up on him. I wouldn't be surprised to see him at the fringe third, fourth round by the time that draft day actually comes. It's pretty wild to see him just keep going up and up after a whole year off. But yeah, that's all right. If he keeps climbing, I'll take the value in Christian Kirk all day long.
exactly. I'll pass on Ridley and give me Kirk. So
Yeah. All right. Another guy kind of in this a similar boat, I would say, is Kirk. Just getting overlooked, even though he should have a fairly solid fantasy finish, is Deontay Johnson. So right now he's going off the board at his ADP is 65, and he is the wide receiver. I got it right here. The wide receiver 30. So wide receiver three, like towards late wide receiver three in that range. And like we're not going to sugarcoat anything. Last year was kind of a struggle with him and Kenny Pickett trying to get on the same page. But one thing that he's maintained since he came into the league is he is a target hog. Even
Oh,
his rookie season, he got 92 targets. In a crowded room, and then he just jumped up from there. 144 targets his sophomore season, 169 the season before last, and then last year he had 147. Now the problem with that is that only yielded about 90. Where is it? Um, 91 catchable balls, which on or sorry, 95 catchable balls on 147 targets. That means that there was a lot of pie left for him to get. If that stat goes up and the chemistry gets a little bit better with Kenny Pickett, takes a step forward, kind of just shows some natural progression from rookie year to sophomore year. That gives Deontay just a little bit extra oomph to actually take a step back towards what we're used to seeing out of him. So, I mean, last year he ended up with 86 catches, 882 yards, and 0 touchdowns. So again, that's a stat that we should hopefully see, some positive regression on. In the years past, he had 8 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. So even if he ends up around the 5 touchdown mark, which is the low end for his career averages, we'll see him jump, worlds better than the wide receiver 30 that he's at right now. Likely
yeah,
getting you somewhere, in the 1,000 to 1,100 yard range, maybe 4 to 6 touchdowns, and you know I think at that point you're pretty excited for the price that you got him for in the sixth, seventh round. Um, right now, he's just such a steal on the board and a really great opportunity to just go and get some guaranteed targets because, I think it's a pretty easy correlation between target volume and fantasy success. And he gets the target volume, and you're getting him at a steal right
yeah, and you know me, Garrett. I was a big hater of
now.
Deontay Johnson last year, and he's one of those guys that I don't know. I've always had a hard time drafting. No particular reason, I guess. Last year, I specifically did not like him because I knew, it was going to be either one of Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett throwing the ball. And like we've seen with rookie wide receivers, rookie quarterbacks to wide receivers, usually decreases their value. Did not expect them to decrease him that much. I talked to you just before this, and I said I'm on the point now where I'm in on Johnson. He's a value.
Mhm.
147 targets, and he's sitting there down there in that wide receiver, 2-3 range, and there's guys like DeAndre Swift and Rashad White getting drafted above and below him, and those are
Yep.
questionable RB2s right now. We don't know their roles. Yes, they have like a chance to solidify his role. We know Deontay Johnson's role. He's a target hog, like you've said, ever since he's come in the league. Even with big old Ben, he was still getting all these targets. Kenny Pickett comes in last year. It did not change the fact that he wasn't getting targets and the fact that, you see these rookie quarterbacks usually take a huge leap from their rookie year to their sophomore year. And you got to imagine that those balls are going to be more catchable and that touchdown numbers should come around. Johnson was kind of nipped in the ankle last year where if you watch the games, he was like, 5 yards out, he'd just get tackled or like ran to the goal line. It's like, kind of
Oh
just that
yeah.
way. But
Just so snake bitten. It was one of those things that as the year kept going on, it's like he ain't gonna do it. Is he? He's so snake bitten. He's so snake bitten. I don't know if it's gonna come around. It's like reminiscent of Melvin Gordon's rookie year where he had all those carries and yards but no touchdowns.
oh god. So, all right, my last one here is another guy. Looking at the value part, um, you know, this one just it kind of baffles me, Gary, because he's technically the wide receiver one on the roster right now, and that is Juju Smith-Schuster. Yes, we did see Devontae Parker get the big deal. Murmurs of DeAndre Hopkins potentially could be going to New England. Nothing obviously moved on that front yet. But Juju, honestly, again, quietly okay year last year. And he did play with Patrick Mahomes, but Mahomes really didn't target the wide receivers as much. Juju was the wide receiver one on Kansas City, but it wasn't like ridiculous popping number that we thought. But 78 receptions, 933 yards, and 3 touchdowns puts him as wide receiver 27. So just outside of wide receiver two, high end wide receiver three. Right now, his current ADP is 116, wide receiver 49. So like you're drafting him as a potential fill-in flex guy. That's what you're getting at Matt right now. Almost in like the 10th round, 11th round, and this is a guy who is a wide receiver one right now on the roster. So I'm like, okay, let's compare because so if you guys pay attention this offseason, Juju and Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers went to New England. Juju filled in, and Jacoby Myers went to Oakland, not Oakland, Las Vegas for the Raiders. And Juju filled in New England, and their contracts were exactly the same: 3 years, $33 million. Juju and Jacoby are both very alike in the same player. They're both slot guys, high volume target guys, not much yards after the catch, but good over the middle type players, and not big touchdown threats. So I'm like, okay, we can kind of compare off of what Jacoby's done the past 2 years to what Juju will probably likely finish in that area, because it kind of filled in that same role. Jacoby Myers has finished as a wide receiver 28 and wide receiver 30 the past 2 years. He's averaging 110 targets a season. That's what you're looking for in these late rounds, is a guy who gets high volume targets. 110 over 2 years, almost roughly a 20% target share in this past 2 years. And like I said, there's really, besides Parker right now, the added competition to the wide receiver room would probably be, I think, Tyquan Thornton, maybe wide receiver 3, Garrett.
Yeah, I think so.
And so
Either him or Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah, him or Kendrick Bourne, and Bourne, kind of got washed out of the whole system last year. And you keep hearing about like Matt Patricia gone. He was horrible last year. He's probably right there with Matt Canada as the worst offensive coordinators in the league. But you got to hope Mac Jones comes back to life a little bit from his rookie year. He obviously took a step down from his rookie year last year. And if he does step up a little bit, you only got to think that helps Juju case for a little bit. And Juju's still relatively young, 26 years old. It's not, and he's been in the league for a while, but he came in at 19. So it's just crazy to think that. So.
Oh yeah, he's still just a young buck, believe it or not.
Right in his prime right now. So.
And I feel like we've been saying that for years and years and years, but yeah, he's a veteran in the league and still still pretty young by comparison. You think of some of these running backs that are out right now that feel like they're getting older that are 26. But Juju, yeah, like you said, he landed in an interesting situation where I think last year going into the Kansas City season, we were hopeful that we could see a big bounce back, and it wasn't monumental given the fact that Tyreek Hill had left. But Juju still rounded out a pretty decent season, and he saw a good amount of weeks that he was definitely involved with the game plan, definitely a focal point at different parts of the season. But at his current landing spot, I think, like you said, with Jacoby Myers taking off, all of a sudden there's a lot more target volume to go around, and this offense should be taking a step forward anyway.
Yeah, and I just want to like put some names out there that are like kind of the same area wide receivers that you'd be shooting for. All other, like the surrounding him for the most part are guys who have could have high floors, but have been major injuries and are question marks. Jamison Williams, Rashad Penny, Devin Achane, Odell Beckham Jr. Like for the most part, Williams and Odell are going to be wide receiver twos on their roster. And they're both coming off of ACL injuries. And then, Achane and, Penny's coming off of a big injury as well. And then Achane is, potentially could start the year as RB3 on that depth chart in Miami. So, like I said, technically, you look at the roster, he is wide receiver one right now, Juju. And in the fact that there's a wide receiver one that far down in value at, almost wide receiver 50 is just kind of baffling.
Yeah, that is a wild one. Yeah, I think too. We had this discussion a little bit ago. I think Mac Jones is due for some positive regression. He really was not set up in a position to succeed at all last year with Matt Patricia being his coordinator, like you had mentioned. It's just he as a rookie, everybody was all excited about how his performance and how poised he was the first season. It seemed like he was a good game manager. I thought he kind of erred in the same fashion as like a Jimmy G, where it's just like, all right, this guy's going to manage your team and get the ball down the field. We're excited to see what he does next. But then last year, he just was not put in a position to ever find that success. So this season, new offensive coordinator, some new weapons to work with, and another season under his belt. So hopefully he takes that step forward, and Juju can be the beneficiary.
Yeah.
All right, my next guy I got here is a sophomore looking to take that next step. I'm going to pick James Cook, who is going 84th overall. He's really at an interesting situation there where you're kind of in that oddball spot and you are hoping and clamoring for a running back with some workload. Because usually you have to grab bell cows, you're grabbing them early in the drafts, and then you kind of have that RB dead zone where it's guys that aren't necessarily desirable, and then it's your dart throws. We're not going to sugarcoat it. James Cook in his rookie year, he only put up 500 yards on the ground and he was hardly utilized. Um, Definitely wasn't ready to hit the ground running. But to his benefit, we saw Devin Singletary leave in free agency, and he went to Houston. Now, why is that a good thing other than just opportunity? If we want to look at snap counts for the year, Devin Singletary was seventh in the league for running backs for snap counts. So he was on the field a lot. And if we want to look at other running backs that are around there, he was right behind Najee Harris, right behind Austin Eckler. He was ahead of Ramondre Stevenson, Leonard Fournette, Miles Sanders, Travis Etienne, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry. So all these guys that seem like they're on the field a lot and don't come off. Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, like he's ahead of all those guys, which is wild because it's like Devin Singletary's never been an elite running back. But being on the field, the more you're on the field, the more opportunities you can get and the more success you can have. So James Cook, another, high point of last year's, he ran at 5.8 yards per carry, which is very, very high. Even the best running backs in the league don't run at that kind of rate, but it's probably not sustainable over, 250 carries on the year. Now, last year he only had 91. He was somewhat involved in the passing game, and with Singletary on the way out, Damian Harris coming over after some injuries from New England. James Cook as a second round pick is kind of poised to step in and take the mantle over in Buffalo. A lot of opportunity there for him, and really he has a really really good situation being in an offense that scores a lot of points.
Don't exclude old man Murray there, Jared or Garrett either. He's still there.
Yeah, Latavius Murray, I continue to write him off. I don't know if he's writing me back, but
Yeah, every year at the end of the season, it's like all of a sudden Murray has value again at 33 or whatever he's at right now.
yeah.
Oh God, yeah. I like, again, a guy I was not high on last year compared to consensus was James Cook, but like at the end of the year there, you definitely saw his role expand a little more, and like you said, 5.8 yards per carry over 97 carries. That's pretty good, but like you said, probably very unlikely it's sustainable. But Cook is more likely going to be that big, make a big play here type back. You could see with his build and all that stuff, he's not going to be the one to handle 25, 24, anything over 20 carries a game. But if he gets 12 to 15, and he has a high chance of busting a big one open or getting some more work in the passing game. Like you said, I really don't. Did they add anybody in the? I don't think they added any wide receiver backs, and I remember if they did or not. But
Yeah, I think they added some receivers late in the draft. I don't remember any running backs of substantial value. I don't
yeah,
think anything before the fourth round.
I can take a look here at the depth chart. They do have Nyheim Hines still on roster. But we saw Hines get traded over there late last year, and he didn't do much. mainly just punt return and kick returns.
All right.
So
I, I thought he had left, but all right, cool.
yeah. So, well, we hit on some big ones today, Garrett, and we didn't really want to bore everybody with going because we had a big list of guys we feel of some value, and we're just gonna name some honorable mention type players. And so like for me, I had Mike Evans. We talked about I think at the losers of the offseason, and we said Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were losers. I don't know if you remember that episode. And we said, but they're like they could lead to a point where they come value. And I think Evans is flirting that with that role right now. Like I said, not going to go too deep into it. He's sitting at a wide receiver 3, but for a guy who has 9 straight seasons of production, I'm going to take production over probability. I'm going to be honest there. So that's if one of my guys, David Njoku, I really like too this year. As an honorable mention, Njoku had kind of his finally kind of you could say his oncoming season after that what was his rookie year he was promising there. And then lastly, the guy who I like again, who we talked about in the offseason, who was a winner, and this year he's of extreme value again for me, is Marquise Brown. He's sitting there at the wide receiver 34 right now. So he's sitting at a late wide receiver 3, a guy who was wide receiver, what was it, 5 before he went down with his injury last year. And, again, really not much competition in that room right now besides Rondell Moore and the rookie Michael Wilson. So, we know quarterback play is going to be a struggle there, but somebody's got to catch the ball. And I know, that's always a scare factor of, oh, yeah, they can throw the ball. But, Brown could be that alpha. We saw him be that alpha at the beginning of last year.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of guys that are undervalued right now. You look down boards. I had some guys that I'm excited about. Brandon Ayuk, Kyle Pitts actually has gotten to a point where he's falling far enough where it's like, hey, I'm interested again. It's no
I don't
longer
know.
second or third round. We're
Sounds like
looking
a
like,
pitfall.
oh god, hey, I hate to even say it, but him, James Conner, huge value right now, going off the board at 74th overall. Tua, who was RB5 before some of his injuries, and if you look at his per game stats, they're terrific. But he's going off the board in the 90s, so it's like, all right, if you want to wait on quarterback, I love him at his value. He's got all the weapons in the world down there. Quentin Johnston as a rookie wide receiver going off at 102. I think if we see an injury to Mike Mike Williams, the guy who always gets hurt, and then that aging Keenan Allen, Johnston's in a good place to potentially get some targets there. You mentioned Njoku, and then 2 other guys that I really wanted to cover. Tyler Conklin going off the board, completely undrafted, 206 overall. He's a streamer candidate. We've seen Rodgers with some connections with Robert Tunyon in the past, where all of a sudden a tight end goes off for several touchdowns, and it's like, okay, who could have predicted this? But Conklin had good target counts and games that he popped off last year. We don't know yet who Rodgers is going to target in the red zone in that offense. There's a lot of opportunity. And then Tyler Algier, who keeps dropping further and further and further.
Just crazy.
Yeah. And it's like he's going off at 130th overall right now. And I know Bijan is the bell cow, and I'm not going to downplay that one bit. But the Falcons led the league in rushing last year, and their offense is going to be focused through running the ball, even though Bijan's going to be taking the bulk of the workload. Algier could be jumping on the field to spell him a little bit, and then if something were to happen, uh, all of a sudden Algier is in a prime position as a handcuff to step in, immediately give a massive workload. Had Bijan not gone there, he probably would be a third round pick right now as a guy
Oh,
like just huge upside and really to get excited about. But as a handcuff going in the 130s, that's pretty solid. And he's probably not going to climb up boards too much either, which is kind of the
no.
exciting part. It's nice to have a few of those guys where, all right, these might be sleepers, but we don't expect them to change too much
Yeah.
versus guys who all of a sudden everybody's hyped about. Like, I like Chris Olave this year, but he's getting overhyped, and all of a sudden he's going to start crawling into a range that it's like, oh, I don't
Yeah.
know.
And me and you, I know, talked about this previously. Tyler Algier, I said you put him now at that tier of like as of the past couple of years, where Tony Pollard and Alexander Madison were always high end handcuffs that were drafted relatively early when it comes to the handcuffs. Like when you start drafting them late in the drafts, but like the top tier handcuffs, Algier definitely has to fall in that category. Year two, not much tires, not much wear and tear on the tires. Put up 1,000 yards as a rookie. Just unfortunately gets, as a football standard, as a football team, smart to bring Bijan in there, because then you got just like two, you have two running backs you can just rely on. As fantasy standard sucks, it's just like it ruined Tyler Algier for so many people this year. But like you said,
Mm-hmm.
people are gonna have that bad taste in their mouth. They're just gonna let him fall. Like you said, I don't see him climbing. Unless Bijan gets hurt. That's the only way that we see anything in preseason. But right now, Algier is like one of those guys where you sneak him in the end, and say Robinson, not trying to put a jinx on him at all or nothing, but if Robinson goes down with an injury week 5, he's one of those guys who turns into a league winner just like that, because he goes
Mm-hmm.
in that high end RB2, low end RB1 category. It's just like it's just crazy, Like I said, Tony Pollard, Alexander Madison, both starters this year, but in the years past have been those guys that you get those flash in the pan weeks where they get the start and they just put up 20 some points and they finish as the RB5 that week. That's
Yeah.
how you could see Algier playing out.
He is 100% what you would expect out of that. All of a sudden, if he were to step in for a lead role for a week, he's getting 20 plus carries, and you're looking at potentially 80 to 100 plus 120 plus yards on the week. All of a sudden, it's like, oh man, I'm glad I had him. He could be a week winner where you just stash him on your bench for a while, and that's all you need him for is 1 or 2 weeks to really help you get an extra win or two.
So like we'll just like, I know we're digging a little deeper on Tyler Algier, but like the running backs that fall in that category around him again, and we've been saying this a lot. Devin Achane, who we talked about, potentially we don't know his role. Could be the pass catcher, could be RB3 for all that we know.
Mm-hmm.
And then just after Algier, you have your handcuff starting, and it's Miller. Okay, Miller right now probably RB3, depending on what happens with Kamara. Could be behind Jamal Williams. We don't know again. Deonta Foreman. We don't really know his role. He could be a RB3. Devin Singletary, likely RB2 there in the Texans offense. And then Ezekiel Elliott, free agent. So,
Yeah.
it's like when you like he's so much a tier above those guys when it comes to handcuffs, because right now I view all those guys as like maybe a potential like couple week starter, but for the most part a handcuff plug and play type deal, I guess, depending on what happens there. But I'd give me the Algier, especially if I have Robinson on my team already.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point too. Is like that is a situation where all of a sudden grabbing your own handcuff might be worth it, but yeah, he's a fun one to think about if opportunity knocks at his door.
Yeah. So with that, Gary, I think that wraps it up here. If we wanted to do just a short episode here, give it some value, we're going to be doing like these companies, a couple of smaller type episodes here where we're hammering out some good content on some preseason guys who we want to get stuff going before draft seasons really start, getting into play here. We are eventually going to be doing, not our next episode, but down the road, we're going to be doing our rankings. Garrett and I will be giving you guys our rankings for players and such. But our next episode we're going to be hitting on is next superstar players. So those guys who are just there, just below, but who are going to burst out the scene, take that big next step. Like guys like last year, I would say like Christian Kirk would be one of them. You could put in that category from last year.
Jalen Waddle,
Yeah.
Cooper Cup a few years ago,
Yep.
Calvin Ridley a few years before.
Yep. Yep. I mean, there's a lot of guys who we feel like, have some potential just to pop off, like Ramondre Stevenson, I guess, last year, there was a lot of preseason hype with him and, it showed up. So, we'll hit on a couple guys here. We think, like those year 2, year 3, possibly even year 4 players. So
Let's shoot our shot, baby.
yep.
All right. Well, it's been an exciting one jumping back in it with you guys. Like Caleb said, we're excited to bring some good predictions for next week and keep on rolling until draft season. Until then, thanks for tuning in with us, and we'll see you next time.